Team Fortress 2 has been one of the most influential games to ever hit the internet, being the major gateway game for millions of people into PC gaming, and has withstood the test of time for well over a decade. The community, despite its many flaws and problems, has come together time and time again to create some of the most awe-inspiring pieces of work, be it comedy or otherwise, throughout the years. And, despite the claims clickbaiters like to make every month that the game is going to die, Team Fortress 2 has been in an upwards trend for the past several months. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. The game's gameplay has, for the most part, beaten out its competitors before the genre was even popularized. Say what you will, but if you have 32 different playable classes, with most of them being added after the game's release, you're going to struggle to balance gameplay out. Ironic, considering which of the two is considered more professionally competitive. Anyway, we could sit around and praise Team Fortress 2's gameplay all day, but distinguishable class silhouettes, box-shaped bodies for shooting, and skill caps can only be talked about for so long until they get boring. So, without further ado, allow me to give you all my classic introduction. Hello everyone, my name is Wolfclock and welcome to Betafied, the show where we take a look at the unused and cut content of a game and talk about what it was, how it worked, and why it was removed from the final game. Now, let me start things off with a little explanation towards my longtime followers so that they can put down their pitchforks. Betafied is a game development analysis series. I review a game's cut content, not just a Hat and Times. I know you want your Sand and Sails and your Battle of the Birds and all that, but unless you're paying me, then it's my show and I get to choose the game. Now then, Team Fortress 2, as you may or may not already know, has quite an extensive and rich development history. After all, as Mr. Newell himself said,
after 9 years in development, hopefully it will have been worth the wait.
I could talk for weeks about Team Fortress 2's pre-release development. Brotherhood of Arms, the Hyperborea placeholder, Invasion, the quote-unquote Roman version, which we only know about due to like one email. I could also talk about Valve's Team Fortress, which was actually different than Brotherhood of Arms. It was being developed before TFC came out. Hell, I could even saturate my channel with videos on pre-release content of the TF2 we know today. I could do an episode about the cut nades, the exploding dispenser, yada yada yada. But no. Today, we're actually going to be taking a look at something that came out long after the game's initial release. A particularly interesting one, as a matter of fact, since this little piece of the game was supposed to come out in 2007 with the release, but was delayed all the way up until August of 2015. Folks, today we're going to be taking a look into everyone's favorite 3CP stalemate map, Powerhouse, and have a peek into what could have been back in 2007. So you're probably wondering about now, Powerhouse? Why in God's name would you be reviewing Powerhouse when there's plenty of other post-release cut content things to be taking a look at? Well, there certainly are a lot of other choices one could make for a video like this, I'll admit it. But the big difference between something like a cut weapon such as the Baleful Beacon or the Repair Node and a map is that we can actually restore a level for all to play without the necessity of things like source mod plugins. You may think initially that doing something like looking into the development of a map as small and boring as Powerhouse is going to be excruciating, not actually worth the time, but as a matter of fact, there's much more that went into this level's creation than just a jump from dev textures to the final art. So stick around, maybe you'll learn something you like. If you've ever played on the level yourself, then I don't need to tell you its problem of getting players stuck in an endless stalemate. As soon as a team pushes their opponents back into their last cap zone, they're about as screwed as, well, a screw. Whoever owns the rocket room to a base on Powerhouse owns 90% of the playing field, and it turns into a game of defense hoping that they can hold out long enough to force a stalemate while their opponents pelt them constantly with a barrage of offensive pushes. As soon as an NG or two make their way into the room and set up a nest, it'll take nothing less than a miracle to get control back, or, in the very least, a well-planned push. As a matter of fact, the only real chance most teams have at this point is usually a handful of backcapping spies that uncloak on mid, and even then, it doesn't take long for the offense to gain control again, repeating the cycle for another 5 to 10 minutes. So what gives? What is the deal with this rocket room in the first place? Even on bottlenecked maps like Five Gorge, there are always alternative routes to get to the next control point. It's the basic concept of having a front line and a flank. So why have this big empty room that every route funnels into? Well, surprise surprise, there are rooms like this on just about every single control point map. And the only difference between this one and others is that this one is lacking a big fat control point smack dab in the middle. Indeed, when taking a look into the decompiled map, it seems that there is a strong amount of evidence to suggest that these rocket rooms would have originally had control points themselves. The final capture points on each side are numbered 2 instead of 1. So, where are the first control points for each base? Gone. Reduced to atoms. Yes, it seems that someone at Valve came to the conclusion that Powerhouse needed to be a 3 CP map instead of a 5 CP, ultimately removing 2 of the control points from the map while at the same time making 0 changes to the area's layouts. Imagine, if you will, for a moment, a version of Powerhouse where there are control points in these rooms. Are you imagining it? Good, because nothing is different. These rooms still act exactly the same as they would if there were control points in here. Engineers still build nests inside it, there are still massive pushes and blocks going from both ends that take place in here. I honestly think the only reason they removed the control points from these rooms was because they felt the second and third caps were too close together. Anyway, there's more on these control points a bit later, so let's move on. We've got a fair bit of ground to cover. Ever noticed how similar this map looks to a certain place no one ever goes? Well, as it turns out, Powerhouse was supposed to be a sister map to everyone's favorite TC map, Hydro. Ironic, isn't it? They're both infamous for having their stalemates, and they're both memed about because of it. If you've ever taken a look at the windows that cover the final capture points, you may have noticed that there's quite a bit of unseen area back here. It's just a lot of decoration, right? Wrong. If the player views this area in spectator mode, or uses noclip to get out there themselves, they'll find that the entire dam from Hydro can be seen on the other side. Interestingly, despite the fact that it can never be seen for the player, the area is complete with a waterfall, not only made out of particles found in the 2007 release of the game, but also a model that was added in 2009 with the Sniper vs. Spy update with Sawmill. This suggests that this back area was originally planned to be used when the level went back into development, or that was in development sometime between 2009 to 2015. Now, this all is actually quite a good segue into the main event as to what makes Powerhouse so special. So, without further delay, let's take a look into its entire unused area. As you may have guessed, this entire back area was initially a playable section of the map. If we take a look into it using a decompiled map and hammer, we can see that this section is filled with props with collisions, player clip brushes, and Half-Life 2 assets? Indeed, it appears that there was a point wherein which the prototyped gameplay for this section used leftover models from Half-Life 2, most likely before the replacement TF2 fence models were created. If we take a look around back here, there are quite a few things to behold. For starters, there are blocked off doorways up near the windowed hallway route that's left in the final map. It's also worth noting that the only ramps to get up out of the water here appear on this side of the fences. Moving along to the opposite end, we can see these closed doors next to these oddly window-looking walls that have each team's logos on them. Finally, in the water, we have some oddly placed models that seem to represent buoys for where the players would not be able to swim, as they line up with the player clip brushes. Now, remember this layout, as it's going to come up later. Before that, we need to take a look at these doorways and decide what happened to them. Why are they like this? Where did they lead? The closest and most obvious point of exit would be the staircase rooms that lead to the windowed hallway I mentioned earlier. This is actually reinforced by the fact that the platform in this room is made up of multiple brushes instead of just one, despite the fact that having one brush would be much more reasonable and lead to a lower file size and compile time. It's unoptimized, and unoptimizations like this usually have one explanation: design revisions. So, we have this route that lets players get from one side to another with a whole lot of background stuff. So what? The windowed hallway does the exact same thing. Well, I have a theory about this area, and a lot of evidence to back it up. But before we get into all of that, we have to take a look at a few more unused pieces of the map. Remember those closed doors and blocked up windows I mentioned? Well, there's a little bit more to them than just that. You see, if we no-clip past this door, which I personally believe is just a background piece and wouldn't have actually been used by the players, we find ourselves inside an entirely unused and unfinished room, complete with those doors I mentioned earlier, the blocked up windows, and a slanted ceiling. Interestingly enough, this area isn't the same on the red side of the map. So what's up? Was there originally going to be a route that just led each team to each other's spawn rooms? No, Jesus! That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Of course there wasn't an immediate route to each other's spawns, why the hell would there be? There was a lot more to these areas than meets the eye. If we take a look at these door models, we'll find that they're complete with the name of the Funk door entity that they would have been parented to. We also find that the doors are doubled up. There isn't just one model, but two of them to completely close up the entryway. I've seen doors like this on a few different official maps, especially Badwater, when the second point gets capped, blocking Red Team from using this door. I also used the double door technique on one of my own maps once, since I found that if I don't have two doors blocking a doorway that opens up after a certain point, bots would try to navigate through it while it was still closed. This actually leads to what I think is going on with these doors. They wouldn't be opened and closed by the player, they would open and close on their own when certain control points are captured. I'll elaborate more on this later. For now, we have some more things to take a look at, especially in the final cap rooms for each side. We still don't know how these back rooms would have been accessed, but there's actually a fair amount of evidence to suggest what the route may have looked like. To begin, when looking into this wall and hammer, we'll find that, on both sides, there are these strange looking windows hidden in them. The windows have misaligned frames and are using Half-Life 2 glass textures. Truly peculiar, but these windows actually help give us a picture of what this area may have looked like. They suggest that there was a room back here behind the sniper area that would have led to the doors and unused back room that we looked at earlier. However, we still have the question of what this room would have looked like and how it would have led back into the capture point room. And to the latter portion of these questions, I have an answer. It's not one you may have expected. This staircase right here is the exact size as a large moving door in TF2. This isn't a coincidence. Past said staircase, again, instead of having this entire section be one large brush, it is broken up, suggesting that the one behind the staircase may have actually been added after the fact. Finally, we have an unused arrow decal that is hiding right next to where a hallway past the staircase would be. These are all, in my opinion, rather obvious indicators of how the original route would have looked. Players would go through a doorway and then follow down a hallway that leads to the back room. As for how this hallway looked, it's disputable. In the back of the red base, there's a rather large ceiling brush complete with dev textures that suggests that there may have been a large room back here. It's hard to say if there's gameplay in this room or if it was just a large backdrop like some of the rooms in Well are, but the evidence stands where it is. So, now that we have all these pieces to the puzzle of Powerhouse, I have a theory on how they could be put together. It wouldn't make sense for both sides to have their doors open at the same time. If this was possible, then players would easily be able to rush to the enemy spawn room at any time. Instead, I believe that the cut control points, the back rooms, the river route, and the deliberately placed fences would have all been used in conjunction with each other. Imagine, if you will, for a moment, Powerhouse is a 5 CP map, and you're defending your last point. All of the regular routes for you to get to your base's rocket room are being camped, and the enemy is closing in. However, behind you, you have a door which leads to a river. Upon the enemy team capturing your rocket room, the door opens up. Suddenly, you're not locked in anymore. If you go around to the river, there's a one-way flank thanks to the fences set up that allows you to get around and behind the enemy and pincer them in, turning their own strength into a weakness by being able to attack from both ends. Obviously, the enemy can get around the fences too by rocket jumping, double jumping, or simply being good at strafing, but it's a lot easier for you to get to them than it is for them to get to you through here. I believe this back area with the river was originally intended to be a defense flanking route that would only exist as an option while defending the final capture point. The route is made pretty clear due to the leftover pieces of the map that are hiding back here. As far as I know, the concept of the defending team receiving a new route to attack the enemy from is relatively unseen in official TF2 maps, at least not to this extent. It's hard to say why exactly this much was cut, but I have a feeling the issue is more the matter that it was never finished, and was instead reworked as opposed to being cut, per se. As I mentioned and showed earlier, a lot of these areas that didn't quite make it into the final map are littered with things like dev textures and are oddly placed, like the back room only being found on the blue side, or the fact that there's a large ceiling without a room on the red side. If these areas were actually cut, there's a greater chance that they'd have textures that fit the surrounding areas, and the randomly placed brushes would probably have been deleted instead of just sitting around and being unused. It seems more likely to me that this entire concept was just never implemented, and that the mappers at Valve decided that they wanted to just turn Powerhouse into a regular CP map like the one that we see today instead of trying something new. So, if this route concept was never truly given a chance by the developers and testers at Valve, does that mean that Powerhouse is doomed to just remain the way it is today? A broken, stalematey mess with nothing special to show for it? Well, not exactly. A couple of months ago, after learning about the unused and hidden content in Powerhouse, I took it upon myself to try my hand at recreating the version we never got, finishing the backrooms and creating a defensive flank concept from scratch. I first tried contacting the creator of Powerhouse Pro, a professional version of Powerhouse that includes a direct route to each other's spawns. But after not receiving a response, I decided to take matters into my own hands and decompiled the map myself. After several days worth of hard work, and a bit of help and suggestions from some members of Pre-Fortress 2, a mod of which I'm a modeler for, I came up with this: Powerhouse Reborn. In addition to the work put into implementing the unused areas and turning the level into a 5 CP map, I've also taken the liberty of making some quality of life improvements to the level. Powerhouse Reborn is compiled using Slartybarty's Slammin' source tools, an updated version of Hammer and its level compiler programs that allows for higher quality effects, such as baked ambient occlusion and better shadows for transparent and translucent materials. I've also removed some unnecessary collisions on models the player never interacts with in order to help save on resources, and have fixed some problematic displacements that either didn't connect up in the original map or had broken lighting due to being partially inside no-draw brushes. All in all, I'd say it's the level I'm most proud of working on for Team Fortress 2, and it really gives an insight into what we could have gotten when it was released. Now, you're probably wondering, how does it play? To answer you, I don't actually know. You see, I haven't had an opportunity to test the level with a group of players. I've only ever received so much feedback from the community on it, and, as such, I've only got this video to show for it. So, to all of you, I'm offering the level to download right now. It comes complete with its VMF completely free to modify and no credit needed, as well as a compiled version ready to be played. If you decide to play it, please do let me know what you think about it. I'm always open to criticism. So, I think that just about wraps things up. There were a few minor details I took the liberty of glossing over, but most of them were just stuff like decals without brush faces, which I fixed in my version of the level. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you'd like more content like this, feel free to let me know. I usually do videos on the game a hat in time, but I'm always open to expanding my channel and going in new directions. And with that being said, I'll see you all around.